I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual now. 起立，面向佛堂，参加先鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位的传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
Sure, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. It's a joy to see everyone online this morning. It's a gorgeous, beautiful day in scenic Indianapolis, Indiana. It's about 70 degrees, slightly overcast, nice and crisp. Fall is in the air, as one might expect. Of course, out there in LA, it's always 76 and sunny. And of course, soon here it's going to get cold. But, you know, I still like to watch it change. This morning, I want to talk a bit about balance. And this isn't balance in the perhaps typical context or connotation, but balance in terms of how one studies and applies the Tao teachings. It bears some thought as we progress down the path to pay attention to how it is that we assimilate and understand and comprehend information, and then what we do with that information once we believe we've digested it to a degree. It's very, very easy in our rush to understanding and our enthusiasm for knowledge and wisdom to occasionally run off somewhat unprepared. There are times where life itself presents us with the occasional obstacle or challenge to our forward progress to kind of slow us down and maybe provide us the opportunity for a little more introspection and some reflection that we hadn't had before. And to that end, I'm going to share a near meaningless but explanatory story that actually occurred this weekend in the hopes of perhaps illustrating that point somewhat. I work as a database administrator for a scientific group here in Indianapolis. I take care of just a whole bunch of database servers that have a whole bunch of databases on them. And every now and again, with some frequency, it's necessary to move one of those databases from a computer to another computer. We do that often enough that it is an extremely routine procedure. And I had one of those that I needed to complete over the weekend. We were scheduled to do the copies on Friday night, and then the actual move of the information on Saturday. Because this is a routine thing, most of the people involved in the process, and there are several of them, don't really stop to think too much about the procedure itself. It's something we do often. It's well rehearsed. It's well done. It's something that occurs with enough frequency that nobody ever forgets how. And yet, in this particular case, this simple run-of-the-mill routine procedure was delayed by 2 days because that forethought was not put into the process. In order for me to bring the information up and make it accessible to the people who need to consume it, I have to have exclusive use of the machine for a brief period of time. I have to be the only person accessing it. And so part of the procedure is making sure that all of the other connections on that computer have been turned off before I have to be there. That didn't happen. Didn't happen Friday. Didn't happen Saturday. About midnight last night. About midnight, very, very early this morning. It finally happened. The folks who were supposed to turn off their various and sundry connections finally did so. And so this morning early, I was able to hop on there and get done what I needed to get done. If a little bit more attention had gone into the procedure, the delay could have been avoided. But because the procedure was simple and routine and something we do all the time, one tiny piece of the procedure was skipped and things stopped moving. The consequences of that are negligible. In a business sense and in the grand scheme of the universe, that event is completely a non-issue. But it illustrates in very small and easy to grasp detail the very same thing that happens in our lives when we fail to achieve a certain degree of balance and understanding. And in light of that, at 2 o'clock this morning, sitting here thinking, gee, this just happened and it probably shouldn't have, but it did. Maybe we should talk about how it is that we study and apply the teachings so that we achieve some balance. Studying the Tao teachings always starts with me. Not me personally, but me. Every one of us who takes it upon ourselves to embrace and follow these teachings, to try to understand the Tao teachings, to try and make sense of what Lao Tzu wrote and said, to try to apply these teachings to the refinement and improvement of our lives and our spiritual selves, has to start with the transformative process that begins inside the self. Peace and tranquility and harmony within a life begin in the heart of the person following the teachings. And understanding begins in the mind of that individual as well. Here we don't often separate the heart and mind components of an individual. We tend to look at the heart and mind as being one mind, which is okay. For me, sometimes for explanatory and understanding purposes, it's easier for me to differentiate the emotional side from the intellectual side of the mind, hence the heart and mind allegory. But however it is you choose to view it, that internal harmony, that internal understanding, that assimilation of knowledge and wisdom begins in the individual. And from that understanding and that wisdom and that knowledge and that harmony resonates from within an example in us behaviorally that is difficult for others to ignore. Now, I'm going to tell you the task of evangelizing the Tao in the American Midwest is still by no means an easy, simple, high numbers sort of a task. The Tao teachings are not well known in America. To this day, they're not. And outside of areas that have a larger Asian population, they're virtually unheard of, let alone the genuine and authentic teachings that we are attempting to follow here. There is a tremendous New Age movement of all things Chinese word keyword proficient out there. But those philosophies and ways of doing things do not necessarily reflect the authentic teachings, and because of that, do not necessarily produce the desired results. That being said, we still meet with some success out here in the nether regions of helping people to recognize the affinity they have for these teachings and to provide them with a place and an opportunity whereby they are able to exercise their desire to embrace and follow the teachings with us. Very soon we are going to go through perhaps one more example of the ultimate expression of that a layperson can do with hopefully the initiation of another Tao House shrine in Indianapolis, which I just think is the coolest thing ever. The people that I know who have joined me in this pursuit, every one of them, I think, is just at the top of their form in their desire to cultivate the teachings and to pass the teachings on to others. The desires of their heart are positive and their goals are worthy, or I wouldn't recommend them. And I hope my example is up to their desires. See, because words only go so far for us. I could go downtown to the mall and stand up on my soapbox and preach all day about the benefits of these teachings and about the difference they make in my life and the difference they make for my family and the people that I know and the folks that are around me. But if I do that, I don't look any different than any of the other 20 guys that are down there standing on a street corner doing the same thing for one philosophy or another. And they're down there. Depending on what day you go downtown and who you ask, we're either 10 minutes from the end of the world or half an hour away from another great flood. The preaching and proselytizing and evangelizing is of limited effect, and there's so much of it that goes on that if we count on our words to convey the teachings, the words are going to get lost in everybody else's words. The message will not be heard. And so it's important that we rectify our own hearts and do our best to refine our own spirituality and create our own peace and harmony and be comfortable with that, so that what we put in front of other people hopefully will attract them to the same things that attracted us. It is crucial that we look before we leap in the study of the Tao. I've only been doing this as a formalized pursuit now for about 10, 15 years, something like that. Derek and I have been wandering around each other's reality since the middle 90s. But it really hasn't been a terribly long time since I first started to practice these authentic teachings. And while I'm ecstatic for the progress that they've wrought in my life, I'm very keenly aware of the fact that I am by no means anybody's guru or master here. I'm still figuring out a lot of this for myself. However, knowing that, I have experientially discovered a couple of things that might be useful and helpful. The first of those is this. Incomplete understanding of the teachings produces incomplete results. And sometimes those incomplete results are disastrous. it is a natural reaction to get all enthusiastic about a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of understanding, and go running off to show somebody what you found, just like you dug a diamond up in the backyard. And that's not necessarily harmful. But when one takes that little tiny bit of understanding or wisdom and knowledge and tries to build it into a philosophy, the effect on others can be catastrophic. We cannot have enough information in that one little tiny nugget to build an entire philosophy from. Although Lao Tzu's words were sparse, they were complete. And from that sparsity of language was created understanding that has filled volumes for people who truly want to understand the essence of the Tao and the Tao teachings. We have to take the time to understand thoroughly what it is we're studying, to make our mistakes and correct them. A week doesn't go by here when I'm on with you guys where I don't say, and here's where I fell down. Here's where I tried this set of teachings, and here's where it didn't work. And I never say the teachings didn't work, I just say I fell down. Because that's the truth. It wasn't that the teaching was ineffective or incomplete, it was that my understanding was ineffective and incomplete. And so if we don't put the time into the process, if we miss one of the steps in the procedure, all of a sudden the forward progress ends. And then we're sitting there wondering how come we're not moving anymore. Why we stopped progressing, where we hit the plateau. The only way to do this effectively is to achieve mastery through practice over a long period of time. That's how it's done. There aren't any shortcuts. There's no magic pill, no magic bullet, no magic anything else. Nobody who picks up these teachings is obligated to understand them on day one and master them by the end of the week. The expectation is that there will be mistakes, there will be shortcomings, there will be failures. The expectation also is that we will get up, dust ourselves off, and try again. Because it's not the destination that becomes critically important. It's the journey. It's getting there. It's learning to apply the teachings. Now, I haven't been doing this for terribly long, but I've been doing it long enough to know, as with the other points, that when our lives are working properly as they should, when we are applying the teachings as they are meant to be applied, that the results of those teachings occur nearly effortlessly. And this is the only spirituality I've ever been involved with, where I have told people for as long as I've been doing this, that if you apply these teachings in the manner in which they are taught, if you do it right, the results of applying these teachings are nearly scientifically reproducible. And they are. I've seen it happen over and over and over, not just in my life, but in the lives of others. That's another really cool aspect to following these disciplines that gets lost when we don't put the time and the effort and the patience into doing it. The unbalanced approach says to run headlong down the path without regard for the things that may impede our progress and the holes that we don't see in front of our own feet. But that's an invitation to a long period of pain and anguish And I'm pain averse, so I prefer to put the time into the process and not miss the steps. And in fact, that is so true that I will state categorically right now that no amount of pushing, no amount of shoving or cajoling or carrying on will cause for this process to complete one iota sooner than it should. Our enthusiasm, lack of enthusiasm, or desire to get through the process quickly is not going to amend the time required or the amount of effort needed to complete the process. And so perhaps the sooner we accept that and achieve that bit of balance, the better off we'll all be. So how do we get there? How do we find that balanced state? How do we find that state of equanimity where we know we're making some forward progress every day and we're not trying to break down the walls or scale the parapets? Well, that's actually pretty simple. Because we can ask ourselves, for instance, this little series of questions I've prepared and make a determination as to where we're going and how we're doing. It is important for us not to compare ourselves to everybody else we walk down the path with. I have this problem with my Tai Chi and martial students as well, from time to time, where Jim looks at Joe, who looks at Sam, and says, "Hey, I don't think I'm doing as well as you are, but you're doing better than him." That's completely irrelevant. In that context, all of my students do as well as they're able to do for where they are and what they're doing at the moment. It's the same thing with learning and applying the Tao teachings. We all start from where we started. Hopefully we all get to the same place one day, but how we get there and when we get there is a matter of evolution and refinement. And it doesn't all happen at the same time or at the same rate. So while we're examining what it is that we're doing, perhaps we can look at, whether or not we're achieving the goals that we've set for ourselves. Whether we can demonstrate in some way to ourselves that we're making some of that forward progress we wanted to make. Whether or not we're achieving a degree of refinement and improvement. We can ask ourselves how we're feeling. Do I have a sense of being somewhat at peace? Do I have a harmonious life, a functioning life, a peaceful life? And I'm very careful at this point, anytime I talk about a philosophy and attitude of peace, to remind people that this doesn't mean you got a life free from problems. Oh, what I wouldn't give. Wouldn't we all? The point there is not the utopian existence. It isn't freedom from suffering and problems. It's how we deal with them that's important. The person with no problems has every reason to be at peace. The person with a lot of problems, perhaps somewhat less. But that doesn't mean the person with a lot of problems cannot also have peace in their lives. If we equate happiness and peacefulness and harmony with the absence of stress and strife and challenges and problems, our understanding of life is very, very skewed and not terribly accurate. But if we understand that most of the time, things are essentially as they should be and generally okay. If we understand that no catastrophe lasts forever and no miracle lasts forever either. If we have that sense of balanced forward direction in our lives, then we can still have peace no matter what comes our way. And rather than being the victims of the challenges that present themselves to us from time to time, we become the managers of those challenges, and we choose how we react and respond to them and what we do about them. And it is from those choices and these teachings that help us to make good choices from whence we derive that peacefulness and that equanimity. We can ask ourselves how our relationships are at home and elsewhere. Because while embracing the Tao teachings begins within the individual, if the teachings do not radiate from us to those around us, and that doesn't mean that everybody around us has to follow our path, but simply be exposed to the transformation that occurs within us, then we need to ask whether or not we're following the teachings correctly. These teachings have a way of transforming an individual such that the transformation affects the attitudes and thoughts and words and actions of the individual practicing the teachings. And those effects affect the people around them. Once again, not to the complete absence of every challenge or disagreement or problem or issue. That's just not how it works. But on the whole, to a perspective of more peace and harmony, not just within the self, but within the home, around the workplace, around wherever it is that we are. If that isn't happening, then we haven't understood something correctly. I just talked to my wife this morning about what a wonderful and special relationship she and I have, and how special and wonderful the relationship we have with our children is. And yet last night, my daughter and I were at each other like a couple of rabid cats. If that sounds incongruous, it isn't. There still is peace and harmony and love and trust and care, but there also is normal teenage angst and other stuff going on. And those things are going to pop up from time to time. It isn't always going to be easy, but it isn't ever going to be impossible. Are we as healthy as we can be at the moment? These teachings move from a perspective of behaving like everybody else in society, perhaps, to a somewhat more mentally and physiologically healthy perspective. Once again, being pain averse, I do the best I can to try and keep this old body working and my mind calm and relaxed, just because I don't like tension, anxiety, and pain. So far, I've done a fair job of that. I have spent way much more of my lifetime not practicing these teachings than I have practicing the teachings. But the restorative aspects of practicing these teachings for the last 10 or 15 years have been remarkably beneficial for me. I don't have any delusions, illusions, or misconceptions about what ultimately is going to get me. I spent an awful lot of my life trying to destroy my heart, and it's going to do me the honor of returning the favor someday. But I have managed to survive where many other people my age are long since dead from cardiovascular disease because of the changes that these teachings and the practices of Tai Chi and Qigong have granted me. So when somebody looks at me and says, well, you've had 3 heart attacks and you got an arrhythmia, how can you possibly talk about yourself as being healthy? I remind them that that's somewhat relative. My granddad, my dad's dad, was dead before he was 60 from cardiovascular failure. My dad just passed from Alzheimer's and had cardiovascular failure. All of us were smokers. All of us were meat and potatoes guys up until I became a Tianzu. Well, shortly before, actually, but you get the point. We all were as American as it gets. And both my dad and my granddad paid the price for it. I'm not dead yet. I'm pretty happy about that. And I know as long as I continue to follow these teachings and pay attention to what I'm doing, that's going to continue to be the case. Do I know I'm going to be alive tomorrow? No. I may walk out the front door and get hit by a bus. And if that happens, I'll be really sorry it did, because I really don't like to get hurt. But I can't get too upset about it. We don't get to ask for life to be a certainty. It's a gift. But if we're doing the best we can, at least the life we get is going to be as healthy and happy as it can be. And lastly, are we progressing or are we sitting still? This is the one subject to the most self-delusion. People can rationalize anything if they want. I'm a past master at rationalization. I'm sure most of us are. But that rationalization for what we're not doing doesn't buy us any progress. It's at this point where honest introspection and self-reflection reveals whether or not we are refining our spirituality correctly and applying the teachings assiduously. And I encourage everybody to go through that process frequently. I absolutely do. I don't always like the answers, but to think you know something and not know that you don't know is unbelievably dangerous. And the only way to get past what we don't know is to discover what we don't know. And the way to do that is this process of introspection. It's a wonderful thing that the farther down the path we get, sometimes the more pleasant that prospect becomes. And pleasant or not, it's always worth doing. So wrap it up here a bit, because I'm a couple of moments over. Derek and I say frequently, and it is the truth, that the path of slow and steady, measured progress is the way to master the Tao teachings. It is. It is a balanced, it is a harmonious, it is a peaceful, it is a non-confrontational approach to improving one's life and improving life for those around us. And if we lose sight of that, we can cause some pretty bad things to happen for ourselves and others. Misplaced enthusiasm and incomplete understanding. I see my spell checker got me again. Have no place in these disciplines. We have to learn to curb our enthusiasm and truly understand what we're doing for ourselves and for others. But once we really and truly understand what we're doing, then the process almost takes on a life of its own that is remarkable and miraculous to watch, and an awful lot of fun to participate in as it transforms us from the inside out. It's a wonderful thing. I said this one last week almost word for word, and I'm going to repeat it again this week because it bears repeating, that the transformations wrought in us by the real Tao, by the genuine and authentic teachings, are permanent, lasting changes, and not the transitory and impermanent mental sorts of machinations we go through as the results of chasing every shortcut, secret, new age path in the world. One of the blessings of the information age and the internet is that there is so much information available that sometimes it can be difficult to choose the right way to go. One of the curses of the information age and the internet is that there is so much information out there available to us that it can be difficult to choose the right way to go. But if you listen to your heart and your mind, you will know what the right way to go is. If something sounds too good to be true, if it sounds too big, too grandiose, too superlative, too over the top to be doable, achievable, or realistic, it probably is. And nowhere in Lao-Tzu's words or anywhere here will anyone tell you that there is any way to get through this process other than one day at a time. We only get 24 hours a day at a time because that's all we can handle. And that's okay. Thank you all very much for letting me share with you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend and a great week. And I hope something I said was helpful. Thank you much.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架规则是一鞠躬，接班一鞠躬。Okay, everybody, we are done.
Participate in the Tao meeting by joining us online. For information, go to Taoism.net/Tao